It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, a man who's looking forward to buying a revolving, spinning lightsaber, is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Within the space of a few hours, the trailer for Kenobi dropped, then the trailer for Star Trek Brave New Worlds dropped, and then the Wentz trade dropped. So you could say I'm having quite a good day.
Yeah, 33% of that was interesting to me. One of it I'm nonplussed by, and the other one wanted to make me jump out of a window. And we'll get onto that later in the show. Show today in two parts. A great show in two parts. NFL news first, because if you know, the NFL's been drunk the last couple of days. So, yeah, we're going to talk about that. And then it's draft season, as the kids would say. And that means we talk quarterbacks with the one, the only Mark Schofield. And looking forward to that chat. And talking about why Washington now will not pick a quarterback at 11.
There has been movement, you could say.
There has been. But until we get to that, Neil, let's get on with the NFL news that happened over the last, I guess, 72 hours, really, that blown up the Twitter and the internet. We're going to do them in chronological order, Neil, because it's just easier, and it's the way I wrote them. So, yeah, we'll start, rightfully so, with Calvin Ridley, who has been, I think, suspended indefinitely at the moment for gambling on NFL games. First of all, I will say it's obvious that there is massive hypocrisy in the world related to this. And yeah, but what we'll say as well is that in the world of American sport, cardinal sin numero uno is betting on your own sport, and he did that. Now, whether that means heavy-handed approach to punishment should be dished out, I'm not 100% sure. However, I think the NFL is suggesting that, yeah, we are aware of our partners, but you do not gamble on NFL games regardless of that, and if you do, you will be punished heavily.
Yeah, see Rose Pete for details. The NFL has obviously changed its stance over the years. I mean, bear in mind, we're about 7 years away from a fantasy football event being arranged by Tony Romo being cancelled by the NFL because it was taking place in a casino. Well, I don't know if anyone's noticed now, we now have an NFL franchise in Las Vegas. We now have official, DraftKings and sportsbooks, all official partners of the NFL. However, for all that, the NFL is a company with 32 regional branches. If you're a player, you are an employee of one of those regional branches. And in the employee handbook, it says, don't bet on games. So if you're going to, and then come out and say, I only bet $1,500, not like have a gambling problem. No, you clearly have a reading problem. Because the rules say don't do it. Now, Calvin Ridley was probably going to be making, I think it was $11 million this year. That's going to toll to next year, but it's now no longer guaranteed. So unless you won $11 million on that $1,500, it was a stupid bet. I'm not getting into the hypocrisy of the NFL with Stephen Ross paying his coaches to lose, and as I say, all existing relationships, because I'm not qualified to. But what I am qualified to say is, if your employee says don't do something, don't do it.
Yeah, it is one of them. Fully aware of stances related to sexual harassment, to battery, to drinks, drugs, whatever, seem not concurrent with this rule, and I'm comfortable to agree on that. But as you said, the NFL has a stance on this, and they have pulled it out. I guess if we go onto the field, the Falcons obviously lost Calvin Ridley last year due to mental health concerns of himself, which is fine. So they didn't have him last year, and now they don't have him this year. I believe Cordero Patterson's a free agent. This team is weirdly in a position where they could quite comfortably win this division, given the fact this division is absolutely horrific right now. So this could be seen as a big blow for the Falcons.
It could, because they are so short of offensive playmakers. They obviously have Matt Ryan carrying the largest cap hit in NFL history. And as I say, Matt Ryan was made up that Ben Roethlisberger was still playing last year to hide the fact that he was dusty. Their defense isn't great. Their offense, as I say, it's short of weapons. I have a criteria that I've stolen from JJ Zacharyson as to how to look for breakout tight ends, and part of the criteria is they're usually second or third year players. They have a speed score, which is something that takes into account a player's size, weight, height, and their 40-yard dash time, and works out into a score that shows how athletic you are. You need a speed score of at least 108, and you probably had a target share of at least 10% the season before. So running these criteria through various databases to try and find a breakout tight end for 2022, I came across Kyle Pitts, which I don't think was the hot take I was looking for. But they pretty much have Kyle Pitts, and that's it. So, yeah, all the Pitts in all my drafts this year, if I can, please. But, as I say, let's look at the Saints. What are they doing at quarterback? They don't know. Let's look at the Panthers. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback and never will. The Bucs, they don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Matt Ryan is the only quarterback with any established tenure, and you could accidentally win this division without even trying. But they are going to have to make serious investment, and they can't afford to because they haven't got the cap space.
Matt Ryan is the active leader in NFL passing yards. There we go. Put that in your pipe and do stuff with it. Let's move on to a slightly different quarterback, a slightly better quarterback, the two-time back-to-back MVP winner Aaron Rodgers, who, according to Ian Rappaport, is signing a 4-year, $200 million contract. According to someone of greater knowledge of the situation, Pat McAfee, who is also wrestling at WrestleMania this year against Austin Theory, he isn't. And get your facts straight, Rappaport, which I do love, because I know we have had conversations about Rappaport in the past, and the fact that Aaron Rodgers seems to now officially troll him does make me laugh out loud. I guess neither of us are surprised that Aaron Rodgers has signed a continuing deal with Green Bay, as basically that was the best place for him to win.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's still not official, I don't think, as to what actual the contract is. Whether it is, we don't know. And all we know is that I think most NFL players would rather Schefter broke their news and not Rap Sheet. It just seems to be the theme. I'm so fed up with Aaron Rodgers. As I say, on the field, that's great. Can we mute him till September? Because I'm fed up with him.
I think though now, Neil, I think you're right. But based on this, he should be reasonably silent and out of your space in the world, right? We may be front row in Dallas, Texas, watching Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory, but outside of that, I'm not sure he's going to do much talking.
What was the word you used to start that sentence? Should. He should shut the F up. He won't, because there's one thing he loves more than choking in the playoffs. It's attention. And pretending that he didn't know it was going to generate attention. Piss off.
Do we now expect? We expect Davante Adams to sign his tag. Do we see that they might try and link a deal for the same length of time as they will for Rodgers?
It depends, because they're not exactly in great cap space themselves. So again, it all depends on what contract they are planning on giving Rodgers, because obviously the tag is the tag. That's been set in stone. They can obviously negotiate a long-term deal, and you'd think that they would want it for probably. They probably want to be paying Adams for at least as long as they're going to have Rodgers. But that's, again, how long do they want Rodgers for? Is it 4 years? Okay, then we need 4 years with Adams. Is it 2 years and we'll see? Well, then you're potentially giving Davante Adams the Amari Cooper contract, which I don't think he'd be happy with. I don't know. I don't see Adams playing anywhere else, because obviously he can only play for the Packers at this stage because of the tag. But you just wonder whether they are, to an extent, going year by year with this. But until we know what Rodgers is actually signing, we won't know.
what does this mean for Jordan Love? And does it make that bizarre pick even more bizarre? Or are you in the galaxy brain world of actually this made Aaron Rodgers angry and made him a 2-time MVP?
No, I think it was a bad pick at the time, and it's a pick that's got worse. That 2020 Packers class is, I say AJ Dillon, who they took in the second round, to timeshare with Aaron Jones, who they then signed to a big contract. They took Jordan Love in the first round to sit for 8 years. That draft class was about as much use as a right turn signal on a NASCAR. And I've said that for a while. Why anyone now would think, quarterback needy teams might think, oh, let's offer something for Jordan Love. Why? I mean, yes, he's a 2-time MVP, but they liked Love enough to take him, thinking, okay, the clock's ticking, and now they've just decided, oh, do you know what, balls to it. When he retires, and we'll worry about it then, because quarterback, we can just magically replace quarterbacks. I don't know what it means from, as I say, at this stage, without him actually doing anything on the field, that pick looks worse than Ryan Leaf and Jamarcus Russell at the moment, because at least they had the chance to fail.
Yeah, it's ungood, and I guess the question is, the only time he actually played, he didn't do very well. I'm going to give you some names, Neil. T. Higgins. I probably shouldn't need to give you any more names, but I'm just going to give you some more. Michael Pittman Jr., Laviska Shenault, KJ Handler, Chase Claypool, Van Jefferson. Maybe not, but yeah. These are all wide receivers who probably could have done a reasonable job in the Green Bay Packers offense. I take you back to T. Higgins. Could you imagine T. Higgins and Devontae Adams in the same backfield? That would be pretty. Anyway, it's a bad pick. Now they need to do something about it. But who is? I mean, we'll get on to quarterback stuff later. But the only people going for Love, I guess, are people who who left at the altar with everyone else. And at the moment, teams would rather have Carson Wentz than Jordan Love. So, I'm not sure there's many teams left unless this is some kind of Carolina Panthers scenario.
Aaron Rodgers has thrown a touchdown pass to one first-round draft pick in his career. Do you know who that first-round draft pick was or is?
Is it Mercedes Lewis?
It's Mercedes Lewis, yeah.
Because I think I've heard this before, and I remember thinking, oh my God. And he was a first-round draft pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right?
He was. He had 10 touchdown catches in, I think it was 2010, when the Jags were competent. I know what I'm saying. But yeah, so basically what they're saying, okay, we'll keep Devontae, we'll re-sign Aaron to what he wants, and let's look at this class of wide receivers in the first round about where we're picking. Oh, a safety. Oh, we'll take that, yeah. Oh, another running back in round 2. Oh, a hybrid tight end fullback. That'll work.
It's a disaster. Let's hope they fix it.
I don't hope they fix it.
No, I don't either. Let's move on to another quarterback, and this one's on the move, and it's Russell Wilson. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and Drew Lock. I did laugh. Is that expensive for the Denver Broncos?
The Broncos historically have had their best success when they go all in on veteran tight ends, so we'll only know if it was expensive when Wilson retires or moves on.
You said tight end, you obviously mean quarterback.
Quarterback, sorry. If you get a winning quarterback, then the price is irrelevant. If you can win a Super Bowl with a quarterback, then it was worth the price. It's a bit surprising that, well, maybe, it would have taken, Fant to go. Noah Fant, his numbers have been quite disappointing, but he's had to deal with shocking quarterback play for 2 years. Obviously, they've now decided that they'll stick with Albert Okuegbunam.
Just call him Albert O like every other person you smart ass.
No, I want to be pretentious. And as I tweeted today, that if you look at Russell Wilson's adjusted yards per attempt when targeting some pretty mediocre tight ends, Even with the other wide receivers in Denver, you do have to think it's Alberto Sisson. It's a bold move, but bear in mind the Broncos have been trying to replace Peyton Manning for 6 years, because that's how long it's been since they've been in the playoffs, I believe. Their last, was the rotting corpse of Peyton Manning was their last playoff appearance. So it's a big move, but we've been saying for 2 years that the Broncos are a quarterback away. Well, here you go.
Is it expensive? Well, as a quarterback, is it necessary? I think it's 100% necessary. Do I have concerns about Russell Wilson? Yes. Longevity. The last 2 seasons, he hasn't been as good as everyone would hope. I love this Albert O season, but I don't know if anyone knows. Just want to make people aware. Albert O is in the middle of the field, and Russell Wilson can't throw there because he's short. We don't have to like it. That's just a fact. So I'm not 100% sure these tight end takes need to get me anywhere. Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, on the other hand, yes, thank you. That will be okay. They had to do something, I think, is what we're saying, and I'm fine that this is the something that they've done. Is it a bit weird that they did it half an hour after Aaron Rodgers signed in Green Bay? Well, yeah, it doesn't. It's not a great look, but whatever. He moved from being the third best quarterback in his division to being the third best quarterback in his division is a concern, but they are infinitely better than they were last season when they won 8 games, I think.
Something like that. They started out 3-0, of course.
Yeah, so is there a chance they could win 11 and make the playoffs? Yes, there is. I'm not sure. I guess we need to speak to Rob Staton, Neil. But I assume we think the Seattle Seahawks are now in draft QB world and will be picking one at 9.
Well, Rob doesn't think and doesn't want them to take one at 9, because I did speculate that maybe this, is Locke a placeholder for 2023, or is he just we liked him, we've brought him along, but we go Malik Willis at 9. He doesn't seem to think that Willis is in play at 9 for the Seahawks.
That's interesting. I guess at some point you need a quarterback to play 17 games for you. Right now, that quarterback would be Drew Lock. If I'm Rob, if he wants to watch 17 games of Drew Lock, all power to him. That's cool. That would cause me great pain, as I will get onto with the commies later on. I do believe they will have to look to address quarterback. I mean, I guess what the team are saying, and they may say it more if they trade Tyler Lockett, is we're going to wait for Bryce Young for the Ohio State quarterback whose name escapes me.
I just assume it's JT Barrett because I thought he'd been there since the dawn of time.
No, so but they may be waiting a year. And everyone's okay with that. I think, maybe they think Pete Carroll can live forever. I mean, in Pete Carroll's world, he probably doesn't care that Drew Lock's his quarterback, because all he's going to do is hand off to a running back anyway.
The big problem for the Seahawks, though, is that they do have this treasure trove of picks to replenish the war chest that they gave up for Jamal Adams.
Yeah.
The problem for the Seahawks is that since, much like another team I can think of, since Scott McCloughan left it, they can't draft properly. They've hit on a couple of wide receivers in the last half decade, of course, yeah. Tyler Lockett, where they picked him, was fantastic. DK Metcalf, they played to his strength. That's fantastic. Everything else has been pretty poor. So you can have all these picks you want, but if you can't find gems, then just because you now, you can't find gems when you're shopping with nickels. Just because you've now got $100 bills doesn't mean you're going to find them either. So it's a question of the Seahawks need to look at their process and say, well, okay, we're not a contender in 2022. If they think they are deluded. they now do have to think, okay, we need to start building to contend in 2024. So they need to start bringing places. If they're going to bring in these prospects, early round draft picks, these need to be players who should be rounding nicely into form by 2024, not players who are going to max out in 2023, and certainly not players who you have no idea how to deploy. Because you need to get them in, you need to get them playing early so that they're battle tested and ready to go to really challenge for divisions and championships. Because it's not going to happen this year, and it probably won't happen next year unless they completely tank. As I say, get Bryce Young, and all of a sudden he's the second coming.
What does the move do for Broncos skill position players in fantasy, Neil?
Well, we do have to entertain the thought, as much as we probably don't like to, but we do have to consider the fact that Jerry Jeudy might not be that good, because he hasn't done an awful lot in 2 years. Courtland Sutton, might not be the next great outside the numbers downfield clasher, because the game seems to be moving away from that. Now, I know the temptation is going to be that all these players are going to get a boost. I mean, Javonte Williams, if they don't re-sign Melvin Gordon, then you're not going to be able to get Williams unless you've got the 101 in some leagues. Obviously, they have to be upgraded, because with the best will in the world, I think we're quite comfortable in saying Russell Wilson is an upgrade on Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. I think we're confident enough in what we're saying and what we're watching. But it's a new system with players he doesn't know. And, the system, as you've made this point, Russell's offensive coordinators change all the time. His style of play doesn't.
Russell Wilson runs the Russell Wilson offense. Don't get it twisted. It's the same regardless of... Me and you could be the offensive coordinator, or Bill Walsh, circa 1985, and the Russell Wilson offense would be exactly the same. So, if you're okay with that, then get used to it. But that's what he runs. And I'm not 100% sure at mid-30s that's going to change. He doesn't strike me as someone who's going to allow that to change anyway. Final news, Neil. Carson Wentz is no longer an Indianapolis Colt. He is a Washington Commander. I keep on wanting to say Commodore. I might just keep on calling them Commodores.
The Washington Commodores, that would be awesome, because then they could play loads of Commodore songs, when they fumble and throw interceptions and whatnot.
Which they are now likely to do. I have a question for you, which you probably have for me, is why?
Because they had to do something. By the sound of it, Washington have been calling every major quarterback team, every quarterback. They inquired about Russell Wilson.
They offered 3 first. They didn't inquire. They offered 3 first-round draft picks for Russell Wilson, but Seattle didn't want to let him stay in conference. I never really understand why that makes the blindest bit of difference, especially considering he sold them to Denver, who, they play this year. But anyway, I mean, Russell had a no-trade clause, so probably would have vetoed the deal. Fair enough, got no real problem with that. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
You did. My biggest concern is that Washington as a franchise has no track record of reclaiming broken players. If the biggest Carson Wentz advocate on the planet, other than members of his own family, I suspect, didn't pound the table to say, we keep him or I go, if players who've played under Frank Reich for a year haven't come out and said, Carson had a bad season, but what makes us think that Scott Turner can turn it round? Very little for me.
There had started to be rumours that maybe Ron Rivera was on the hot seat.
Okay.
And this move suggests that he is. Because this is the move of a desperate human being. Because what is the best case scenario in this situation? 10 wins. It's not happening, by the way. I'm talking best case scenario. Best case scenario is he's about as good as he was for the Colts, which, if we laugh at the brain fart aside, he was like 27-7 last year, I think. They did okay.
And 2 of those interceptions were in the last game.
Yeah, so he did okay. Like, he's a joke and he shouldn't. But what I'm saying is he better than Taylor Heineke? Yeah, just. They won 7 games with Taylor Heineke. Bit injury luck, they get 10 wins and maybe a place in the playoffs because the NFC is toilet. Okay, cool. So that's what you're aiming for. The bit I don't understand, and I was speaking on Twitter before, on a kind of situation where you're like, what are you even trying to do? Like, what's your with Zachary Kruger? And I was like, just keep Heineke and draft someone. Draft Willis, and we'll come on to it with Mark. Hope he's a unicorn. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? Like, okay, you don't like any of them, that's fine. But if you think Carson Wentz is going to be bad enough that you win 2 games and a first pick next year to get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, you're not. You're back in the middle. You may as well have signed like me or you. Like, you're trying to win more games than you won last year, which I understand. But as we say all the time, being in the middle of the NFL is the worst place to be in, and they are bottom middle. Do you know what I mean? They are a lower middle team,
and have existed in the middle for the best part of the whole time I've watched it. Because even when they were, in theory, bad enough to draft one of the stud quarterbacks, they had to trade a boatload of picks to get that high to get RG3.
Correct.
So for the bulk of time, I don't remember Washington ever being in the early enough. They were never.
They were second, and they picked Chase Young, which was the right pick at the time, but they could have picked Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
And guess what? Hindsight's 2020, but that's a fucking bad pick now. But there's not much you can do about it.
Wentz, as you say, is one of those players who he might get you to 8 and 9, which is one win that takes you further out of the quarterback sweepstakes in next year's draft class.
Picking 16th.
Yeah, he's not going to win you 12 games. That Wentz has gone. That 2017 blip was. It was a thunderbolt across the sky.
2022, and we're still talking about Carson Wentz 2017. What world is this? Why we don't talk about other quarterbacks 5 years ago? Like, what?
We don't talk about Bruno either.
Well, we don't talk about Bruno. We should do, because that's a fucking great film. We could rant about this all day, but I
think you should as well.
It's a really bad move. It shows desperation, and it shows that they don't believe any of the quarterbacks are good. Okay, fair enough, but they're also afraid of not winning, and assume that Carson Wentz will help them.
And by the way, I have absolutely no doubt that Washington will beat the Eagles once next season, but Wentz going 10 for 27 for 54 yards, a pick and 2 fumbles is not going to be the reason why.
No, exactly. Final thing on this, Indianapolis fans, bravo, you got rid of Carson Wentz, but, and this is a big but, this is not a Jimmy Garoppolo fan web podcast, so guess what? He is just as bad as Carson Wentz, so enjoy that hellscape.
Well, if Carson's now a commander, maybe you go for Captain Kirk.
Oh, boo. Right, Neil, that's enough of the news. Let's get Mark on to talk NFL draft. And joining us now, privilege as always, it's draft season, so let's talk quarterbacks with the amazing Mark Schofield. Mark, how are we?
We're doing well. Interested day to have me on. I honestly, guys, I wrote this just an hour ago. We're recording this 2 hours or so after the Washington Commanders traded for Carson Wentz. Now, a bit of context to that. Just over a week ago, I was in Indianapolis at the Combine, and I arrived on Tuesday. And the beauty of the combine in Indianapolis is I landed at 136 or something like that, or 120 or something like that. And 40 minutes later, I'm in the media rooms. Like, you could get from the airport to the convention center, all that stuff. It's beautiful. It's great. But as I'm walking through security to get into where the podium sessions are, and Tuesday was all general managers and head coaches, a red-faced Chris Ballard is walking out, surrounded by people. And he's like sweat pouring down his, and I'm just wondering, like, what did I miss? And so I start, hey, what happened with Ballard? Ballard just spent 40 minutes ripping Carson Wentz, was like the immediate feedback. He basically said, look, he's a 29-year-old man. I spent an hour with him on the phone, and I had to tell him about how he needs to get better at handling criticism and coaching. And it was to the point, guys, where every single conversation after that was just Ballard just tanked Wentz's trade value. Like, there's no way a GM is now going to say, I'll trade for Carson Wentz. Like, yeah, he just obliterated his trade value. Apparently not, because the Washington Commanders just traded for Carson Wentz. And I think, it's not like they gave him like a sixth. They sent a third, a conditional third, which could become a second for Carson Wentz, or swap a second round picks. You've invited me on to talk about this quarterback draft class. That right there tells you about this quarterback draft class, because a team just gave up premium picks to get Carson Wentz, a team that was sitting at 11th overall in this draft, that could theoretically have their pick of any of these quarterbacks in this draft at 11. They said, no, we're going to go get Carson Wentz. In Indianapolis, every hushed conversation about quarterbacks quickly turned to Mitchell Trubisky is going to get a big, meaningful, free agency deal. Like, teams are going to sign him to start. Mitchell Trubisky, who threw as many meaningful passes last season as I did. And so that, guys, tells you right there, the NFL does not like this quarterback class. Now, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Like, a lot of us in the media are basically saying, yeah, these guys are maybe a year away. And so maybe that's the calculus. But for whatever reason, this league has just decided, nope, don't like this quarterback class. I was just talking to somebody that covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm like, the Bucs might have their pick of quarterbacks at the end of the first round. And the response was, won't matter. They don't like this class. That's how the league views this class. And so it's been fun, guys. It was great catching up.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Go and enjoy the rest of your nights, guys.
So on that then, there's a they're not very good, and there's a we don't know what he can do based on the fact that he played for Liberty. And I guess the question is, on the Willis one, is the NFL now has what can only be described in a kind of in a Bill Simmons-esque unicorn-style quarterback group. Your Josh Allens, your Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, people like that. Is there a team that may talk itself into a fact that, given the skill set and the measurables, quote unquote, that they will pick Willis and pray that he becomes one of them? And if he doesn't, he doesn't. But they took a swing.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, I think that a team is going to look at Josh Allen, a team is going to look at Malik Willis, and they're going to talk themselves into, we're going to take the home run swing. And if it connects on, the 5, 10, 15, 12% chance, whatever percent chance you give it, that Willis pans out, it becomes what he could be, it was worth it. If not, you're probably getting fired, but the team probably wasn't going to be good anyway if it doesn't pan out. So a team like Carolina, perhaps at 6, a team maybe, Atlanta at 8, like, obviously wide receiver might be an issue for them right now. But, they might be willing to do that. As I wrote, we also might see a situation where if every team decides, look, we're going to solve our problems with veterans via free agency or trade. So say Carolina goes to Jimmy Garoppolo route. Say Washington, we saw what they did. Say a team a little later in the draft like New Orleans, brings James Winston back and then draft somebody on day 3. Say the Steelers go the Trubisky route, or, flip it. Say, Garoppolo is in Pittsburgh and Carolina goes the Trubisky route. Indianapolis now seems to have a need at QB. They don't have a pick in the first round, but, they also might go a veteran route. We might see these guys slide to scenarios like Tennessee at 26, or, I said Tampa Bay doesn't like the class, but maybe they just decide, hey, Malik Willis is staring us in the face. He's QB1. He hasn't gone yet. Why not? Like, the value is hard to pass up. These guys might end up in situations where they won't have to play right away and they won't have huge expectations around them. And so they can sit and develop and perhaps blossom into better quarterbacks as a result. Like, it's one thing if you're drafting, like, take Detroit. If Detroit drafts Malik Willis at 2, for example, they're going to have to play him right away, or pretty close to that. They could, go the Niners route with Trey Lance and sort of just roll with Jared Goff for a year, and then they'd have to play him. But there will be organizational pressure to play him. There will be fan base pressure to play him. If they draft Malik Willis at 32, there's not as much pressure. It's like you get the guy at the end of the first round. Like, maybe you just drafted him because of the 5th-year option. And so, there's less pressure. There's less of an organizational or external push to get the guy on the field. So these guys might benefit from that. These guys might end up in better situations, and the organizations might have more patience with them as a result of this push to get veterans as opposed to rookies.
Go on, Neil, sorry.
I was just going to say, if we actually just talk about Willis, as a player and a prospect, rather, from what you've seen, is it the fact that I've seen some good plays from what little knowledge I have of the situation? I've seen some pretty daft plays, when it comes to throwing the ball. Is it a case of, at the moment, Liberty, as you know, it's not exactly a powerhouse.
Right.
All I know from Liberty, it's a very annoying jingle for an advert you see in America. It's a very unimaginative one as well, just saying the name over and over again. Is there a danger that at the moment he's just basically just got by because he's the best athlete on the field, and that an NFL coach has got to try and harness that, but also make him play within a system?
Yeah, I think there is an element of that to his evaluation process and to his track record as a quarterback. I think what's interesting about Willis is, when you watch him, he tried as much as he could to sort of play within a system, to sort of play from the pocket. There were certainly moments where he let the athleticism out, but I think he could have done more of it. And he got in out of a conscious effort on his part to say, look, I can be a pocket passer, I can be an NFL quarterback, or just kind of what they were coaching him to do at Liberty. But I do think that, like, that's a good sign for him. A lot of times you get these athletic quarterbacks, when they come out, they rely on the athleticism too much, almost to a fault. And it's like, yeah, you could have gotten away with that on Saturday against, an FCS school. You're not doing that against the Von Millers of the world. They're going to be just as athletic as you. They're going to beat you to the edge. You can't always escape. And so I think Willis deserves some credit for that. But it's a bet on upside. It's a bet on arm and athleticism, because you watch him struggle at times, making repeated mistakes at times on similar concepts week in and week out, where, he didn't have a ton of talent around him, but you should make better decisions with the football and not repeat some of these mistakes. So it is a huge bet on upside. What works in his favor, though, is he might be the upside guy in this class. Like, you look at Ritter and Pickett and Howell and Strawn and the rest of them, there are questions. There are, if not red flags, yellow flags. And so if you're going to take a swing at a quarterback early in this draft, I'd understand if a general manager was like, you know what, I'm just going to bet on the upside.
Can I ask a question on, you mentioned Pickett, and I don't really want to get into the fact that the dude's got small hands compared to other quarterbacks, but I'm interested in the fact that he played 4 years at Pitt, I think, and I don't believe that fumbling was a major issue there, and I'm no genius when it comes to meteorological issues, but I believe Pittsburgh is cold. Now, he does play ACC football, so it's not cold everywhere. I do understand that. He's playing Duke, he's playing North Carolina, Miami, defo not cold, Clemson not cold. But is the hand size thing a Pickett's got small hands, therefore I'm not picking him, or is it quarterbacks of that with that hand size have never been good, therefore I am scared to pick him because therefore he shouldn't be good?
Yeah, I think logically it's more the latter. It makes him an outlier. It's the smallest measured hand since Michael Vick, and Michael Vick was an elite athlete. And while Pickett is an athletic quarterback, he's not Michael Vick. So as a general manager, are you willing to place your job on the line in the first round for a statistical outlier, for a analytical, measurable outlier? It's a risk. It'd be like, drafted a 5'6" wide receiver in the first round. Like, maybe he's great, but if you miss on it, that's a big miss. And so I think teams that have those sort of measurable thresholds, teams that place value on hand size, might shy away from him and just say, look, by our thresholds, size and height and measurables that we've looked into, he's just too big of a risk. Now, to your point about the fumbles, he had 26 fumbles in 4+ years because he played in like 4 games as a freshman. He had 5 years at Pitt. 26 fumbles over that period of time is not really a lot. And when I look at hand size, I look to see, is he just coughing the ball up inexplicably in the pocket? No, I don't really see that. He played behind some bad offensive lines. There were some times where, he got blasted and he coughed the ball up, but your hands could have been 17 inches, and that's going to happen. I look at the fact that, did he struggle in weather? No. Pittsburgh, as you pointed out correctly, it's a cold, wet, raw area. Like, people are like, oh, how is he going to play in the AFC North? Well, plays in the same stadium the Steelers did. And the other thing is this. You guys have known me long enough. You remember my love and affinity for Brett Rippon. He was my QB4 that year. Brett Rippon had smaller hands, not as small as Pickett's, but on the smaller side. He had fumble issues in the pocket. When he played his final, conference championship game against, I believe it was Fresno State that year, it's in Boise, sleet, raw, windy, rainy kind of night. They turned him into a handoff-only quarterback in the third and fourth quarter because he couldn't throw the ball in those conditions. I don't see that with Pickett. And so there are reasons to be concerned with Pickett beyond hand size, like response to pressure, pocket management, and things like that. I think he's somebody that needs an ideal offensive line and offensive situation around him. But as far as hand size, that's not a concern for me. Other teams might feel differently. They might say, look, we just have a 9.5-inch threshold or a 9.25-inch threshold, and we're just not comfortable with it. Fine. Joe Burrow just went to a Super Bowl with 9-inch hands. Like, I don't think it's as big an issue. And, of course, he's got the whole double-jointed finger thing, which he says sort of helps him grip the ball better anyway. He didn't seem to have any problem throwing the bigger football at the Combine or even at the Senior Bowl, so I don't think it's an issue other teams might.
I think it's a thing with the NFL, isn't it? It's all right to fail if you fail the traditional way, but if you do something different and fail, then you'll get laughed out the joint.
Right. I think that's exactly right, Neil. Like, I always try to remind people, these are men and women making these decisions that have bills to pay, mortgages to pay, kids to put in college, X, Y, and Z. If you look at this draft class and decide, I'm going to, Desmond Ridder checks a lot of boxes for us, we're going to draft him. Like, if it doesn't pan out, it's like, well, okay, well, look at what he did at the Combine. Played a number of years, led his team to the semifinals against Alabama. Like, okay, like, it didn't pan out, but the evaluation was right. If you draft Kenny Pickett in the top 10 and he's a statistical outlier and a measurables outlier, that's the kind of decision that gets you fired. Now, if both guys pan out and you get fired, the guy that drafted Ridder probably gets a second job. The guy that drafted Pickett maybe doesn't get a second job. And you could probably say the same thing about some other quarterbacks in this class or even other quarterbacks that have gone before. Like, there are jobs where if the guy doesn't pan out, you get rehired. And there are jobs where, there are decisions that if the guy doesn't pan out, you don't get rehired.
Bear in mind, we've not actually seen him properly because of the injury. He didn't really take part in the Senior Bowl. He hasn't done it at the Combine. Has Matt Corral hurt his draft stock or actually helped it by not doing anything?
There were a lot of people who said and wrote after the Senior Bowl that the big winner was Matt Corral, because he wasn't there. He wasn't he's an underclassman, and there are a lot of people that think that, like, he might be kind of helping himself because he's not doing too much, and we're getting to see these other guys. Now, he still faces some questions, and he still has some sort of yellow flag, so to speak. The amount of interceptions he threw 2 years ago, he had 5 in one game, 6 in another. Like, 6 interceptions in a season or 11 interceptions in a season is sometimes a red flag. To do it in 2 games, that's even more terrifying. But he bounced back, took better care of the football last year. So I think that's a good sign for his development. The other thing is this. Lane Kiffin made it easy for him to play the position. There were a lot of designed reads, designed throws, 1 to 2 option concepts where it's like, if these 2 guys aren't open, you can just tuck it and go. Then watch what he was asked to do on third downs and clutch situations. It wasn't a lot. Like, that's worrisome to me and to talking to some other people. It's like, when you're not going to let the guy play quarterback on third down or in the fourth quarter, on a Saturday, what's going to happen to him when he's asked to do that on a Sunday? Like, now, I still think he's talented. I think he, along with Carson Strong, were the two most impressive guys I talked to in Indy. You know, Matt Corral talked about leadership, and he talked about how it was never a question in his mind that he was going to play in the bowl game. Of course he was. These are my teammates. They got me to this point. Why would I let them down and turn my back on them at the biggest game of the year? I don't care that it's on a national championship. It's a bowl game. You want to go out with a win. I was not going to opt out. I wasn't going to sit out for draft stock or something like that. Absolutely not. Which I thought was a fantastic way to address that, because people were like, do you have regrets playing in the Sugar Bowl now? And he's like, no, absolutely not. So I thought, look, that part of it matters. And I'm sure that he sounded good in meetings and teams will buy into the leadership aspect there. But he's going to face a developmental curve, you know, because you can pick out examples of him getting to backside concepts and working through progressions and moving defenders with his eyes and stuff. But a lot of that was sometimes built into what he was asked to do. And so he will face an adjustment. But I think he has benefited in a way from not doing things when the other guys have, because the other guys have exposed some more warts or shown some more flaws, and he's kind of been able to sort of step away from it all and let this process play out.
It's a bit like, you know, Corey Davis as a wide receiver in 2017 didn't do anything and goes top five, when if he ran the 40 and done everything, people have said, seriously? But because he didn't, it's, you know, it's, as I say, you know, it's better to say nothing and be thought clever than open your mouth and remove all doubt. Yeah.
Right.
Bit deep, I know. I apologise.
Right. No, it works for me.
In the opposite situation, in terms of the draft process, has a single game on tape in front of a national audience heard someone's draft stock this season as much as Desmond Ridder's did against Bama?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about that game, because when you watch it live, it's like, man, yeah, this is as close as you get to an NFL experience for a quarterback. And in the moment, it was like, this looks rough. Rewatching it, like, there were some things that he did in that game that, like, okay, I get it. Like, that's an NFL kind of defense, and I can understand the thought process there. And so, you know, it's a situation where I think hindsight and being able to go back and rewatch it, there are some things that actually he did do well in that game. But for many, Ridder had a down cycle. You know, he could have come out last year. He didn't. Yes, he leads into the semifinals, but struggled at first watch, at first blush against Alabama. And then, you know, by all accounts, didn't do well in the Senior Bowl. I think he tested well at the Combine, showed a little bit more athleticism than I think people were expecting. And so now there's this idea that, you know, maybe there's a path for him that's a little bit wider, because initially it was like narrow path. He's in one of the more, like, quote unquote NFL ready guys that's going to be a pure pocket passer. But now you see a little bit more athleticism, and so maybe that error band's a little bit wider. But opinions on him are varied. I spent a lot of time in Indianapolis with Nate Tice, who does such great work for The Athletic and, you know, other places, and obviously knows the position extremely well, played it, was Russell Wilson's backup. And he's a huge fan of Ridder. Like, thinks he's the top guy in this class. You talk to other people, and they view him as like a late day two guy. Like, that's the other thing with this class. Like, there's no consensus. And it's really like that at a number of different positions, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's corner, whether it's edge, offensive tackle, and certainly quarterback. Ask 5 different people, you get 5 different answers on who the top guy at the position is. So the opinions on Ridder are varied. I'm more in the line that, like, there's a good quarterback there, but again, we'll probably need to be in the right environment to succeed.
Does seem to be. I was listening to Establish the Run with Evan Silver and Adam Levitan, and Evan said that if anyone comes out and says they know exactly who's going to be the first overall pick, at the moment they're full of shit, because you know, the Jags, you know, didn't have a personnel director. You know, they didn't decide till like a few weeks ago, oh, tell you what, Doug, you can do it with Trent Baalke. So it's, as I say, it's every position. There's no clear-cut number one. Well, there might be, you know, punter, you know, that kid who ran a 4.23 or whatever it was. Right. He's probably the punter one, but who cares? So of the other ones, the other, like, the next generation, so we've got the likes of Sam Howell, Carson Strong, and the wonderfully named Bailey Zappi. Do you have any strong thoughts on any of them, other than that Zappi's offense looked an awful lot air raidy to me? So I'm not sure how.
I mean, look, if you're a believer in reps, if you're somebody that believes that opportunities and experience and snap counts and passing attempts matters, like Zappy's your guy because he threw it like 8 zillion times, both at Houston Baptist, which by the way, that field along the right sideline, there's a CVS. When you're playing with a pharmacy on the sideline, that's where he was at Houston Baptist, and he obviously transferred to Western Kentucky, put up huge numbers. I mean, Zappy's in sort of that class of guys that I think is like, yeah, he's probably a career backup spot starter. He's Taylor Heinicke 2.0, and you know what that's worth in the NFL. Howell is interesting. I think he's somebody that's almost on the flip side of what Paul was just asking about with Desmond Ridder, because Howell had a bad game at the start of the year, threw like 2 or 3 picks against Virginia Tech when he was sort of consensus QB 1 or 2 coming into the year, and people were just like, I'm done with you, and just like, Toy Story, dropped him into the bin. And he got better as the year went on, but I don't think it's enough to sort of get him into solidified first-round position. And I think he is more of a second to third round guy. I think he's very much a Baker Mayfield type of player. And as we've seen, Mayfield can get you to the playoffs, but things need to be right around him. The guy that I think perhaps has the most to show and the most potential is Strawn. Obviously played last year hurt, has this knee condition, that right knee injury. And he told us in Indianapolis, look, my doctors told me to take a year off. My dad told me to take a year off. But I said, absolutely not. I wanted to play one more season with my teammates, with my friends, with the guys that I grew up with in Nevada. And they came up with this 6-month plan to allow him to play. He had to sit out from practices, ride around campus at times in a golf cart. But he said, look, you weren't seeing the full 100% me. I was, struggling at times. I couldn't move around in the pocket. I'm working with Jordan Palmer now. We discovered in watching the film that I was really compensating for that injury, and it was impacted my lower body mechanics and throwing motion. And he had a really good session at the combine in Indy. And, I think there's potential there for him to be a very good quarterback. And, the knee injury might see him slide into the second round, sort of into that Drew Lock range. But I think he's a better quarterback. I'm higher on him than I was on Drew Lock. And so I think Strawn has potential. If you get deep into this draft, Skylar Thompson from Kansas State, might have some of the best pure throws out of anybody in this group. He had a throw. I did a video on it for my YouTube channel against LSU that was like, all right, well, that's impressive. Now, obviously, he's not a first or second or third round guy. He's still a day 3 guy. But when you start getting into the later in this draft, he's somebody that sort of stands out to me.
I have a question to go back. You've mentioned Indianapolis possibly 4 or 5 times. There is a possibility that was the last time that the combine would be in Indianapolis. Based on you media guys, it's one of the best places to have something, because as you quite rightly pointed out when you were talking about going from the airport to the Lucas Oil, it's half an hour. There's about 5 steakhouses that you're allowed in, and you'll be sitting there, and Mike Tomlin's in the next booth to you.
Yep.
I guess, is there a situation where you think a lot of people who will do the combine bit may still go to wherever it is next, probably Vegas or whatever, but a lot of the insiders will not, because that kind of interaction that they could have had accidentally bumping into someone has just disappeared now?
I think you'll see, Paul, that start to happen. You'll see some sort of attrition as a result. I mean, people will find new steakhouses, will find new bars to go to and things like that. Like, don't worry about us from that standpoint. But the beauty of having it in Indianapolis, as somebody that's only been to, 2 combines, is that it's all right there. The IU Medical Center, where they do all the medical testing, is like a 6-block walk from the convention center, where a lot of this stuff happens, where the media workroom is, where the interview and podium sessions happen, where Radio Row is set up, where the bench press takes place. If you're a team, you're in all likelihood staying at the JW Marriott, which is, a little bit west of the downtown area. But you can get from the JW Marriott to the convention center and then to Lucas Oil without stepping foot outside. Like, it's a lot of the city is connected by like skywalks and walkways and tunnels. And so if it's a typical, late February Indianapolis day where it's like, 42 degrees out and rainy, or, 3 years ago when I was there, it was snowing. You don't have to go outside. You can get everywhere you really need to be, including high velocity, which is one of the, bars where those hushed conversations happen without setting foot outside. You can walk to pretty much anything you want to see. And Indianapolis is a beautiful city. Like, my last afternoon there, I went to like the Indiana State Museum, the Indianapolis Artscape, an art museum that had like Native American and Western art, the NCAA Hall of Champions. It's all within walking distance. Now, like I said, they move it to Dallas, they move it to Vegas. We'll find new places to go, but it will be more spread out. It will be more sprawling. Like, one team might stay here, another team might stay there. Like, people will end up at different places. You go to Indianapolis, it's like people are at Prime 47, they're at high velocity. Like, that's where they are. And if you want to bump into somebody late at night, you know where to go. It's going to be a bit more spread out. And so between that and the fact that teams are starting to cut back on going to these things, the Niners didn't go, the Rams didn't go. They might send a couple of scouts but to do some interviews and meetings, but you can do that stuff over Zoom. You can do it over Skype. And so we might see the in-person attendance dip anyway. I think that's a trend that's happening. And so, if they move it, if they don't, we might see less and less, fewer and fewer teams go anyway.
See, this is a big argument that we'll have about why a night out in Liverpool is much better than Manchester, because it's all closer together.
Right.
Manchester is I'll say it quietly.
Don't tell anyone.
It's a wonderful city, but it's taxis to get to it from place to place. Whereas Liverpool, you can get taxis if you're lazy. We've done it in the past, but you can do it by walking. And that's appealing, especially when you're inebriated.
Or you could be like myself and Arif Hassan, where in Indianapolis they have those little motorized scooters you can rent through Uber. And Arif and I were like scooter buddies, booting around downtown Indianapolis, weaving through crowds and, ringing the bell at each other with people that we knew and people we didn't know. And you can get around that way too. And, again, if it's in Dallas or, I've heard, Los Angeles, like, do I want to sit in 40 minutes of traffic to get to the podiums to see the offensive lineman talk and then 40 minutes back to get to the media center? Like, I understand that the NFL is hoping that SoFi becomes sort of this massive sprawling campus where they can do all this stuff and build it up that way. It won't be like that right away. Now, maybe that's why I think it was Ian Rappaport who said that, like, it does look like the Combine is at least back at Indy for one more year, but beyond that, who knows?
Final question, Mark, and it would be ridiculous to get you on the phone without talking about the resurgent, the resplendent, the absolutely magnificent Newcastle United Football Club, who, if we would have had you on 2 months ago, this would have been a very different conversation. But with the exception of probably Manchester City and Liverpool, they are the informed team in the country, and I just want you to talk about how good they've been.
They've been look, the 2022 table, right? You've got Liverpool, 8 games, 22 points, and a plus 17 goal differential. Manchester City, 8 games, 19 points, plus 11 goal differential. Newcastle United, 7 games, 17 points, plus 7 goal differential. They are the number 3 team in the table for just this year alone. 4 wins and a draw in their last 5 matches. Now, I believe 7 points clear of the drop, and they've got Brentford, Leeds, and Everton all between them in the drop right now. It's been fantastic. Now, we can leave it there. We don't have to talk about the new ownership group or anything like that. We can just sort of brush that to the side. What's funny, obviously, there are world events that have brought ownership groups such as the Chelsea ownership group into a new and different light. And in a conversation among some football people, we were actually talking about that, and people were like, yeah, what about Newcastle's new ownership group? And I had to, like, slowly slink away from the conversation. But no, the resurgence has been fantastic. It makes me feel a little bit better about the jerseys that I purchased at the start of the year, because some arrived, and then I was just like, I'm never going to dust these off because this club is just a disaster. But they've turned things around. It looks like they'll avoid the drop, and maybe, just maybe, brighter days will continue to be on the horizon and actually perhaps arrive.
What I would say is geopolitics and state ownership aside, you were about to enter a world where June, July, and August are almost as much fun as September, October, November, as you wake up and you are linked with another human being. I'm literally looking here as we speak, and Karim Benzema has scored twice in 30 seconds against Paris Saint-Germain to put them 3-1 up to score his hat-trick, and I'm thinking Newcastle could buy him if they wanted to because they've got loads of money, and that's a world you want to live in. It's much more fun.
Paul, it's a whole new world. Neil absolutely tagged me in a throwback to Hatem Ben Afra, and that was the last time that there was actual joy watching Newcastle. And I've got in the other room like my not even the 10, the 37. Nice. When they first signed him, like that's how much I got an orange Johan Kabay from him his days as well. But not since those days have I actually had joy, thinking about and watching this club. And so it's nice to feel that again. It is awkward at times, like with this strange feeling in my is that hope or a heart attack? I'm not sure. But I think it's actually hope. And so that feels good too, guys. It feels good.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you a lot for your time. We'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, guys. Always a blast.
Neil, the brilliant Mark Schofield there, chatting all things QB, Indianapolis. Him and Arif Hassan. He never said drunk, but let's be clear, he was drunk on a scooter, beeping at people. Sounds like a fever dream.
I just know that if they tried to pull that shit in Liverpool, the PR fume could power the city for quite some time.
I love it. Neil, we're an hour in, so we're going to let everyone get on with their day. Before we're back, where can people catch you?
Find me on the Twitter at Endleton13. Slightly bad taste, but I've written a piece on the betting odds for Week 1 starting quarterbacks for 4 QB needy teams. That's for Numberfire. I also have a piece coming out soon on 10 players whose draft stock was most affected by events in the Combine. That'll be on Player Profiler. Yes, I've also tentatively agreed for someone else to come on in the next few weeks to talk draft prospects for the tight end position. So I'm very excited about that.
Amazing. I am at Mandy7 combined. We are at waxing_lyrical. Touchdown review was last week. We did a breakdown of 4 of the divisions, looking to do the next 4 hopefully tomorrow, scheduling permitting. We will be discussing the NFC East, so I will get to rant a lot. Brilliant show, Neil, as always. I'm going to go now and watch some 2017 Carson Wentz tape, because that's what I need in my life. Until then, until next time, these top guys are out.